that's
possible.
just how like humans perceive things in general. Like we all have like a theory, even if we don't realize it, but like a frame
Yeah,
of reference for how we see
we
the
already
world.
have a frame
Right.
of reference.
I do not agree with it. I do not agree that in general people do that, because that is one way. That's the top down way. You come up with a theory first and then try to understand your experiences. But some people, some groups of people try to live it first, experience it, and then gather the knowledge from their experience and try to come up with a framework. So it's more like based on
Wait,
experience.
but you're saying that they are creating a framework though. But
They
their
are.
framework is based on experience.
Yeah.
But that experience is still
Yeah.
through a human interface of senses, brain, eyes, and stuff, right? So like,
There's always that glass or that
Right, yeah.
perception. There's always that way of looking, because I cannot just look. Like I have to focus on something. I cannot just look at everything at the same time. So what my brain first looks for is probably the first reference or the first, let's say, tainted glass, just like you called it.
What about the experience that you just get without expecting it? Have you ever had those? Sometimes you're not looking for it, but it just happens.
Yeah.
And then you experience it. What about those?
I think the way people experience stuff is not. It's not easy as like I just experienced it. It's like there's always that way of perceiving that experience.
Perceiving?
Yeah.
Pursuing?
Or feel, or like you can call it feeling. I'll call it perception. Like how I translate experience A is not the same way you're gonna translate it. Even if it's exactly the same. Let's assume all the variables are the same, and there's this experience A that I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
The way you look at it, the way I look at it, or Senchy or Brian looks at it, it's just gonna have that kind of reference, historical, other experiences.
100%.
So the point is, there's always a concept of how you feel things too. So
Okay.
even if you're just looking for adventure, I think there's a way you're gonna interpret any adventure from the onset.
I agree with that. There is your personal subjective interpretation to all the experiences. Then what? That's
okay,
the thing.
okay.
Then
So
what?
here's what I'm saying. Okay? I think the idea is that we are experiencing and having our own experiences, right? But like imagine like a sculpture with some marble, like it's like a chunk of stone, right? That sculpture is going to have a concept that they are going to try to create out of stone. But instead of creating it themselves out of stone, they create tools and then give it to other people and then tell them the concept to create, right? Now, does that concept in that person's mind actually exist? Or does it only exist
yet.
once it's created?
It might exist, but that person might not know, because that person didn't come up with that concept from seeing somewhere else. They just saw it in their mind. But we cannot rule out the possibility that that concept might exist in body somewhere else already.
Right. So
That's like
okay.
in sometimes in symbols, what is it called? The Mandela? No.
The Mandela Effect, right? Like, do you mean the
Do
thing?
you know the Mandela?
No.
Ooh, okay, those are interesting.
What is it
Yeah.
called?
So the Mandela Effect, if I remember it right, is like this idea that some people believe that Nelson Mandela like died years ago, but like in reality he's actually been around and released from prison and was doing like loads of activities and stuff. But like some people believe that he was in prison the entire time, and the Mandela Effect is basically like a large group of people experience one thing and another large group of people experience another thing, but one of them is quote unquote true, but how did a whole group of people experience something that they didn't, that wasn't actually like quote unquote recorded history, right? Like another one is like the Fruit of the Loom shirts, those really cheap Amazon ones, right? Some people thought there was like a cornucopia, which is like a surrounding over the logo, and they could have sworn down that there was that thing in the logo, except if you actually check the logo, it was never there. So like, why though? Is that what you mean by the Mandela Effect? Because that's the Mandela Effect.
I was not talking about
No,
Mandela
completely
Effect,
something
but the
completely else.
symbols, it might be like connected, but the I'm talking about the symbol.
Of what?
Like in Buddhism, like sometimes
Oh,
like
like
there
a
are
wheel?
like petals
Oh,
and then
Mandala.
like mandala.
Mandela.
I don't know what it's called. That's why I'm asking.
I think that's like a Mandela.
Do you have a phone?
It's
Anyway,
charging instead.
there's this symbol I will show you, but that symbol has been there for such a long time, like in ancient histories, but it does not just appear in like Eastern philosophies or Eastern religious symbols, but that symbol is like shared almost by different cultures in the world. And like it might be connected to what Brian said, but like it's different groups of people experiencing the same thing, but there is no visible physical contact between the two. So the question is, how are we experiencing the same thing or like coming up with similar concept?
Yeah.
Like sometimes our knowledge, at least my knowledge, is that people come to share similar ideas because they have been in contact, like a group of people immigrating to another country and taking their culture. That's why the other culture became aware of this first group's culture. But what I was describing earlier was two groups of people completely separated and nowhere near each other, but they still experience something too similar. And then that can be found in the symbols that we put in our religious like scripts, or like alchemy, like
I think with that, it's hard to label that as like if it's truly like disconnected, right? Because these might be like cultural ideas that have been passed down like from early humans, even like pre-humans, right? Like these ideas that have never really, because like okay, sure they are disconnected now or in the historical record, right. Like you don't want to like use like historical records from like archaeology to decide how things are now, because we are constantly finding new information. But I agree. I think there are like concepts that seem to like occur in multiple different things. I would say like fields of studies, right? Like certain fields of studies that might seem very different from each other, but actually they all sort of touch on the same ideas once you get to a certain point, right?
Yeah. They're just talking about it in different languages. Math, like science, philosophy. They're talking about life, but math talks about it in numbers, let's say. Philosophy talks about it in ways
Concepts,
of thinking.
ideas.
Psychology focuses on the mind, but we're all talking about the similar things, but in different languages.
Wow.
So then that, I guess that comes back to like the main point, right? All of these, like, are these things created by humans, or do they like exist outside of themselves and we are discovering them? Like, is math created or is it discovered?
Wow.
You can go.
I think
And Senchy,
I think it can be both. I think it can be both. Cause there's like, for example, 0 to the power 0 is, what is it? I think it's a 1. 0 factorial is 1. We had to agree on that for the math to work. So, I don't know. Thinking about it, it seems implausible. When you think about it, like 0 factorial, that means, factorial means if it's 3 factorial, it's like 3 times 2 times 1. That's 3 factorial. So the product of all those numbers is 6. So it's 6. So imagine when it's 0 factorial, because 1 factorial is 1 times, it's like 1.
Yeah.
2 factorial is 2 times 1, which is 2. And then 0 factorial is 1.
Because it's just 0.
Then it's like, how is that? How do we get there? And this issue was debated over, and we came to a consensus, like, oh, I don't know, better debaters or to make the math work. So in that sense, I look at it as, we might have played with the screws. We might have tampered with the screws, let's say, if it exists outside of humans. And then when we look at some of the what we see in nature, golden ratio, how the leaves turn out, we may believe that it does exist outside of human invention. So I really don't know.
Because touching on that,
it depends.
It's like our perception and what we agree upon, right? And you can go like even a higher, like a step above that, and say like things like appear to be in a pattern and consistent and coincidental simply because that is the way that we perceive things. Like maybe the universe is in like chaos and disarray, but like the way the human brain perceives nature naturally creates patterns, naturally makes connections in a linear fashion because we experience time linearly. Maybe there is no like cohesion to anything, but we are able to observe things and create patterns and connections between them in like a way that's not really that well understood, but sure, we do study it, but it's just sort of this like metaphysical thing that our brain does. And so of course the maths and science has to make sense to nature because we created the maths to explain nature. So if it doesn't explain nature, then we change maths or science to fit nature. But nature is, and it always is. Everything else has to be compared to that, right? Like we come up with a theory, and the theories can be like beautiful, elegant, like string theory or whatever. But like if there's no experiments that we can do to verify it, then it's useless.
There's something Senchy always says. He says nature is too perfect. I'd like him to elaborate on that because I hear that phrase and I always ask myself whether it's because we perceive it as perfect or it is perfect. It's a good question. So
before you go on, elaborate on it. What do you mean by
Please.
nature is perfect?
Huh? Oh no, I was coming from another side of nature being perfect. As in, I don't know, like just name me anything. Like look at the tree outside. Why is that tree like it looks so much like a tree? And it's gonna like live, it's gonna die, it's gonna I don't know, it has chance to grow, it has chance to I don't know, just things are perfect I feel. Or like even with us. I don't know. I was saying that more in terms of challenges. I realized or I see people who suffer a lot or go through more challenges and I realize they are the ones who kind of become tougher. Or they're they're more resilient, or people who go through difficult things. And people who go through maybe other like are raised I'd say softer or in a more easy environment, they have it easier. And I thought like it all balances out, Nothing is like you might think a billionaire is like so happy, but no, like I think it's all balances out. Or like that a poor farmer might be very sad, but I don't think the difference between the poor farmer and the billionaire will be so much. Like there'll always be something that balances it out. And at least that's what I feel in terms of being perfect. I don't think there's anything that is imperfect. Like name me one thing that could be imperfect.
But I feel right now it would be hard to compare on the concept of perfection because I still don't fully understand what you mean by perfect. Like I understand it, but for me, I use other words to describe it other than perfect.
Could I touch it?
Sure.
I think what Senchy's saying, like nature is nature, and then by definition, because it's nature, it is perfection. Like nature doesn't need perfection, it simply is. And so the concept of perfection is something that we created and we can apply it to nature, but nature just simply is. And because of that, there is nothing it has to compare itself to. Like perfection for us has to have something to be compared to because we created it and we create concepts, and concepts only exist in relations. But nature doesn't exist in relations. Our perception of nature is, but like nature is.
I think perfection is a weak word to describe nature. It's just so it's everything.
I'm not sure about the statement that nature doesn't exist in relation. I believe that nature do exist in relation.
I guess because like if you were to like remove humans from the equation, nature will simply continue.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist in relation. trees don't just exist as trees. There's water, there's streams, there's oceans, there's mountains. Those are all living and doing their own process in creating the universe. Like, focusing on human beings is just being super centric on human beings. Yeah, the world will keep living without us, but that doesn't mean that they exist in isolation. There are still relations between different natural resources.
I think there's like, okay, so like, in order for things to exist in relation to each other, they have to be separate from one another.
Why? Say more.
Okay, sure. Like, in order for something to relate to something else, if it was the same thing,
Yeah.
you can't have a relation. But
But
like,
nothing. What if nothing is ever the same?
exactly, nothing is ever the same, and so nothing can ever be a thing. Like, everything simply is, or it isn't. Like what I'm saying is like in order for that chair to be in relation to the ground, it has to be separate from the ground in
Yeah.
some sense in our perception.
Yeah.
But in nature doesn't have a separation
it's
within
all,
itself.
All of it is just
Exactly.
not even things. I don't know what.
Yes,
word.
but okay. I think we're still talking about the same thing.
Sure.
But we're, at least us, we're thinking about different stages.
Sure.
Because when you describe that, in order for the chair to exist as a separate thing, correct me if I'm wrong, or for it to be in relation to the ground, it needs to be, I don't know what
It has to have
Like we
some,
think it's
yeah.
different. Like when you say water and tree have to combine or something, you kind of realize that water and tree are two different things. Or like when
their
we say water and tree,
functions are, when I say
because then you would just say
different
tree,
things,
because then you'd consider both a tree or both.
I'm thinking when I talk about relations, I'm not really thinking about how they look or how different they look. I'm more of thinking about how they communicate with one another and how they give and receive things they need to grow. For example, when I'm thinking about the trees, I'm thinking about how the roots absorb water from the ground, absorb sunlight from the sun, and then depending on the weather, depending on the temperature, depending on the density of the air, whatever, all of that combined, the trees either live healthily or struggle to live or adjust to the environment. All of those are relationships in my mind. So I'm thinking more about the process in which different things, different beings exist in relation to one another. Not necessarily just thinking about how the tree looks different from this chair. Obviously they look different, but the materials, the chair comes from wood. You need, in order to make it, it just doesn't come into a chair. Human beings had to make it, but human beings cannot make it without trees existing. They cannot make it without using water, without using adhesive, without.
Could I touch on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that was my train of thought.
I think the process was like the key word that I picked up on, right? I think you're saying like nature exists in processes. Like water is a tool that nature uses. I'm using these. Forgive my language use because they might be implying like meanings that I don't mean. But like nature has different processes that it uses to accomplish what nature chooses to do, right? Like in order for a tree, the process of a tree to like age from seed to aging to fruit and then dying, it has many different facets that contribute to it. So even though we can separate it out and label one part of that process as a tree and another part of that process as the water for that tree and the fertilizer and the seeds and leaves and all of that, we can separate out the processes, right?
Yeah.
I think what I'm saying is that the process in of itself doesn't need that separation.
It doesn't, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's so like I think my main thing is that like the processes themselves will continue to be and do what it does, and the separations that we create to label those are not in themselves meaningful
Yeah.
outside of nature, right?
Yeah.
But we have the concepts of it, right? and we can use those concepts to relate to each other, right? Like by separating the process of a leaf as a concept, we can compare the different leaves of trees to each other and then decide if one is like a coniferous one or a deciduous tree.
That is for me, what Brian just said is basically categorizing things. And then, so my question is, why are we comparing these? What's our purpose?
I think our purpose initially was the idea of perfection, right? And like separating out like the idea that nature is perfect. Like, what does that mean? And I think the way you were approaching it was that nature. Okay. I think our idea was that perfection is a concept that we created to label nature. At least that's what Senchy was doing, I think. And
Is that what you were doing?
like
Please go.
and I think if I'm understanding what you're doing, I'm not quite sure the separation that we're getting with perfection, right? I think you disagreed with the idea that nature could be perfect.
I cannot say I disagree with it, because for me, perfection, I don't know if we understand it the same way. Like, I don't even need the word perfection when I'm talking about nature, because that's not my priority. I'm not thinking about how nature could be perfect, but I am more intrigued by how nature lives.
Sure.
The processes.
Okay.
And I think that's like where like I always go back and say like the processes that we even observe are still like our observations of it, right?
I'm sure, but the thing is, why are we thinking about perfection?
We're not. Perfection is just one word to use it. We don't have to use the word perfection.
Okay.
I prefer just like the nature is, and we are observing nature.
But why? That's interesting to me, because why is observe the only word that you think of when you're thinking about humans' relationships with nature?
Okay,
Because
yeah, sure. We are a
beings-
part of nature as well,
Yes.
and so we are also a process of nature
Yes.
that is observing in itself.
We cannot observe the nature in isolation at all, because have you ever thought about, in experiments, there are participants, right? When the participants know that they're being observed, they act in a certain way. We're all familiar with that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You are not, like, I
Observation
don't
bias, yeah.
always, I'm not the same when I'm on my own and when I'm with you, when
Yeah.
a friend is there to look at me. I feel like that the perfect example would be with my cleanliness. When I'm on my own, so I'm like, I would be putting things here and there. But when I know that you would be coming in, because I know you value cleanliness, I might like try to clean it up a little bit. That's because I know you might be observing me, even if you're not doing it consciously or intentionally.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
are you
with
implying
nature-
then, like, because we are observing nature, it cannot act as it should does?
Not
as
it. Forget
or-
about should or should not. It might
I don't know.
nature might not even.
With the simple fact of observation of it, like,
There's a
sullies
it's
it.
a
Almost like,
possibility.
Oh, it's like, imagine you're on a chessboard and the whole chessboard is nature and you're one of the pawns. And when you look at it, you're like, okay, I can see everything, I'm noticing things. But no, the simple fact that you are a pawn means that you cannot see, like, you and the other things kind of.
Neither can you do the act of other,
Yeah.
let's say the queen.
Yeah.
So I don't think you see everything. Do we see everything?
that's exactly.
Museums are like the most unnatural part
No,
of
but
civilization.
since humans made it, I feel that's also natural.
No, for me, it's not just because humans made it, but because we're trying to preserve things
Yeah.
in a way not to be used or understand. Not like use is not the right word, but
Yeah.
like not to be understood, but just to be observed and admired.
But then
Maybe museums were not built for that purposes, but right now we're using it like that.
But then, so if it was used for understanding and what?
Learning.
Understanding and learning, then if we would be fine. But then there are so many kids who go to museums and they understand and learn.
Yeah.
So it's
And-
kind of like maybe your view on how you see museums, which I could agree with. But I'm sure there are many kids who learn through museums. I learn through museums. There could be like walking museums where, like I know in Nepal where like certain like portions of the city are considered to be a museum. Like you can just walk around
Mhm.
because the buildings themselves are part of the museum.
And
So
what I think is we are only defining a changing nature.
Yeah.
Well, can nature have parts which don't change and parts which change? So why do we say nature should always change? What kind of like by having by having unnatural things, we are only suggesting that nature should do this instead of this. We are only prescribing what nature should be. And I'm saying like, what if nature is, and we don't need to, limit nature?
Yeah.
Why limit nature to things that change, or that do not change, or that can change, or that should change? But why can't it be all the things? Like, because we have trees are living, we have stones are not living, and they're still part of nature. So I mean that the same thing can contain two like a dichotomous system, which is unchanging and changing.
When you say unchanging,
Because, for example, you talked about museums as unnatural because they don't change, for example.
That's a prescription.
no, I'm trying to think if that's what I said and if that's what I meant.
Oh.
I think if I'm understanding you, mate, like cultures aren't unchanging. So the idea of like a museum that like snapshots that culture and removes it from the context of a changing culture, you are doing something unnatural, but in the process doing a social utility that's actually more beneficial than allowing it to like do its natural process of changing.
Okay, so I don't know if I can paraphrase that, but I am catching glimpses of it. And I think when we are using these words natural and natural,
Yeah.
I feel
They're
like
loaded. They're
we are
very
still
loaded, yeah.
talking about different ideas
Yeah.
because
Yeah, yeah.
I do not necessarily disagree with you. I am agreeing with all of you,
Yeah.
but I feel like for me the clash is coming from the word itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You know?
that's the point. It's
Yeah.
like, why do humans use the word nature if it doesn't really work?
Yeah.
Like, we cannot really come to a fixed definition. That's my issue with the word natural.
Yeah, I don't use it. Personally, I don't like using it for similar reasons. But I'm still interested in what you mean by unchanging. Like,
No,
Do
no.
you-
I'm just saying, like, people like you. I think you talked about
preservation.
how preserving, like, museums, how they preserve whatever they preserve, and it's a sign of an unnatural thing. And I'm like, no, I don't think it should be a sign of an unnatural thing, because the same thing, let's say nature, contains a dichotomy, or things that are kind of what do you call things like
what things
opposites,
do not- what things do
opposites,
not
but
change
but
in
they
nature?
they're still encapsulated.
gravity.
What do you say?
Oh, okay.
What things
What-
do not change in nature?
Constants.
What's that?
I'm saying that
The
what,
only things
what
that
if
does-
what if things what if
Like electrical charge. I don't know.
oh yeah, I guess that's, yeah, but I'm just assuming that
No, he's just saying just because they change or just because
if
they don't change doesn't
they-
mean they're not
they're
natural.
not
Yeah.
natural.
Everything
I think
must
for-
be contained within it.
I think
I think that could be related back to what Brian said. Like, it is serving the social purpose,
Mhm.
but
It's unnatural.
Well, okay.
I'm still thinking about inaccessibility, but that wouldn't directly answer why something would be natural or unnatural.
Yeah.
So I'm still not like disagreeing with you.
Mhm.
I'm trying to understand what I meant by
I,
that.
if you mean by inaccessibility, I think that's like rooted in the idea that like nothing really can be built without things coming before it, right?
Mhm.
Like building a chair requires the material to be processed, It requires like a carpenter or some kind of like understanding of the schematics of like the process in actually building it. You need to screw it in. All of that process requires so many people in just creating it, but also the centuries of knowledge being passed down to finally culminate in that product, right? What gives someone the right to then decide that it's theirs and to stop someone else from having it? Is it the money?
That's the thing. I cannot speak
That's nice.
But don't you think it's
directly
like...
no, wait, because in some cultures when you're working, the process is not just for human beings and making something, like producing a result. Like you are working with the materials. So to build a chair, you would need all the resources, right? You can't just take it. You can't just go and cut down a tree. You actually ask for permission. Like
From
some
who?
from the trees, from your nature, from your
From the tree?
surrounding.
Oh no, yeah, some
But
sort
I
of-
will...
in like halal meat, the animals have to like accept that they want to be killed.
How?
They like spray water in their ears, and it'll cause the like I think the animals like not. I might be making this up.
Whoa.
No,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know
This is
about
interesting.
that.
Yeah.
I do
Let's
not
go
know
to
about
that.
that. But for
I
example,
cut that out. Cut that out.
I don't
Bro,
know.
yeah,
that's
yeah.
actually...
Yeah.
Now when I think of it, it's kind of ruthless, bro. Put something in the ear, should they do certain thing, and then...
That's
Because
not what I
what
was
if it's like
thinking.
irritation?
That's not like don't.
That's
Yes, bro.
that's
yeah.
not what I was thinking, and that's not the example that I'm going for.
Of course.
But for example,
How do I get permission from a tree?
like I cannot really say the exact things, but you know how people can just read gestures, not like just interpreting something, but like dreams, like your way of living. It's not just like, hey tree, can I take this from you, and the tree nods. That's not how it works. But like the dream states, the way, like the environment, like for example, you might know that cutting this tree might be detrimental to your ecological system that you're living in. Then maybe it's a sign for you not to do that. Maybe you could get... I do not know where people would get signs from exactly, because that's not a culture that I'm living in right now. But
No, a tree can't consent. Like, why does a tree make fruits in the first place? Because it wants to attract animals to eat this fruits and then lay the seeds in like ground. Like in a form is
Does
like
it-
a
what
tree.
about like an
Yeah.
apple tree that has been so like the oranges in America, they've been made so genetically modified that they don't even have seeds.
Sure. In that sense, we
That's
are
just-
perverting nature.
yeah, that is
yeah.
us hybriding
Yeah.
something.
I would disagree with that. I think
But
it's
all these trees are probably hybrids.
probably, but that's just genetic modification that we've been like practicing in. But I
So
think
so
what I'm,
these
like,
trees deserve to be asked consent from us.
We cannot really decide if this city is natural, because good cities are built depending on how the land itself is. You would want to
course.
build some buildings nearer to the water, and like you will. It's like
urban planning.
urban planning, right?
Yeah, of course.
So like
No,
consent.
urban
could
planning
come
in America is...
Terrible.
Consent can come in many different forms.
And we can easily put like a human centric idea of what is consent, because a lot of times like we cannot see the big picture, right? We might make a decision on nature that years later turns out it was actually a horrific thing to do. Like a lot of those like invading animals that we brought on ships and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
that actually screwed up the entire
Yeah, like
ecological
pigs
system.
here.
Yeah. In California, they brought eucalyptus trees, which is now leading to the forest
Forest
fires. Like we didn't know that, but we still did it.
And also, like, consent is another way of how something would move in relation to you. That concept might be a little bit alienating right now, because we see a lot of things that are produced exactly the same. But with some materials, let's say you're curving wood, or you're working with like clay. Like clay has its own, like they communicate to you. You can't just like force your way to make it move a certain way.
Yeah,
You can
okay.
just like shape wood in certain way. Woods like depending on the moisture in it, depending on their density, it's gonna react differently. So you have to understand the material. You have to communicate with the material that you're working with, which is why it's a process. So which is why back in the days, I don't know, like when people were making things, the things that they used like pots and pans and plates and chairs, none of them look the same.
Yeah, yeah.
They all
Yeah.
look uniquely different. They have like different patterns, different shapes,
Yeah.
but now we're so used to seeing these.
Oh yeah.
They all look the
similar.
same.
A question.
No, continue.
It's really gonna change the subject.
Oh, okay.
Kinda,
If
so.
I just want to add one thing, because this is something that like is in art, and it's definitely like a change in like the past. Like you might notice now that like a lot of cities are like homogenous. Every city looks the damn
Oh,
same.
in
Oh,
America.
you
bro.
once sent me the
Damn.
post. Sometimes in cities, the fences, how the fences are made, how the lampposts look, how the railings look, just by looking at it, we used to be able to tell which city this might be or
Yeah.
which country this might be. But now that every country or every developing, quote unquote, developing cities are like being civilized, we all look the same. The buildings are just like, modern, like no shape, no symbols
So,
whatsoever.
The idea was that like in the past there was this like liberal idea that we had to transcend culture in order to become unified as humans. We needed like a flat, like we want to remove cultural identities. We want like a uniform idea of what is like modern. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of like sleek sci-fi. So when you think of like the future,
Yeah.
you think like very simplified,
Yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
elegant and smooth.
Everything is the same.
No detail. Everything
It's
is
like
the same.
erasure
It is
of our
exactly the point.
identities. It's almost like the
Exactly.
idea of color
Exactly.
blindness. I'm not racist because
Yeah.
I'm colorblind. It's
Exactly,
similar.
exactly. So I would add on to that, like to me, like a definition of like I'm not saying I don't know if this applies to everything, but for me, when something is unnatural, I think of it as it is too unified.
So
Yeah.
because we've talked about like natural and unnatural, and I'm thinking like, can humans really work with nature? Like, do we have the capacity and the ability to really be symbiotic? Because if you think about like bees produce, but in their production of honey, the nature benefits a lot. Like if they don't build their houses, nature would suffer. But us, when we build our houses,
Yeah, nature
nature suffers.
suffers.
So, how can humans get to a point where, or are we heading that direction? Is it possible? Or how can we actually get to the point where, humans are, whatever they do, it's actually a net positive for nature? Because,
What does it mean, positive for nature?
okay, using the bees example, pollination, we know that bees are starting to be imported to other countries because of the mass extinction. And like large fields of crops, for example, or fruit or whatever we do, don't have enough bees to pollinate them.
Yeah.
And we know that by pollination we get food, and if we get food, let's say if you have a pet, I have food, I have money, a pet lives, it creates this kind of cycle, which every entity within that cycle is kind of benefits
Win-win.
from
And also it's
from
like
that
interdependent.
yeah, so that interdependence, which maybe not none, but there's less suffering within that kind of interdependence. So
Okay, like the problem. Okay, you know what? I would say like look back to the past, because I think for a long time humans have lived in harmony
Yeah.
with nature.
Yeah.
I think it's like a very recent thing, in like the grand scheme, a recent like departure from nature where it no longer was about living in harmony; it was about exploiting. And I think like
Getting the most out of it.
the
kind
most out of it in the most
mentality.
efficient way, and like maximizing short-term benefits over long-term sustaining, right?
Yeah.
Like take like pollution in general, or even like oil. We found oil, we quickly found a use case of it. Society's industrialized like crazy, we got so much technological advancements and stuff, but culturally we have not really changed like from then. We haven't really adapted to the technologies, but we're now facing the problems of the technologies that we've created with global warming. But to solve the problem of global warming, we can't come together as a culture because it requires too much unity that we haven't focused on, right?
Well,
I don't think the solution is to go back. I don't think it's feasible, and I don't even think we should. Like, we have economies right now that are so complex that there's almost no way to go back without serious harm happening to so many people and potential like loss of lives and damage that like could also affect nature. I think the goal is like transitioning slowly to a more harmonious things, but it's incremental. It has to be slow. It has to be planned out and thought. But it also has to be quick, because there is a deadline.
No, the thing is, the only reason we think it needs to be quick is because detrimental effects are happening very quickly. That's why we started thinking, oh, we need to act quickly. But that is very counterproductive to our own movements because change does not happen quickly. Like,
It doesn't happen quickly naturally.
yeah, change as in like
You can
sustainable change that
Okay.
we want cannot be achieved in a day. Like, you need to heal. There's so much trauma that people and the like nature itself is like experiencing. For example, like in for example, like deforestation, right? After there's a wildfire, forest fire, you cannot expect the trees to grow out there and be a forest again the next day. It needs to heal. The ground needs to heal. The seeds need to heal. The seeds need to grow. There's a process in changing and growing. That's why we need immediate change. We want change. Yes, things need to get better, but better things are not gonna come in a short amount of time. So we still
I
need
would-
that time.
I would disagree with that, and I would agree that like it does need time, but I think as humans we've shown and proven that we can like surpass nature in certain aspects by using nature. I think there is an ingenuity and like creativity in humanity that can find solutions to things that appeared as impossible until they weren't. And I do think like if we want the natural process of things, if we were following how things are as they are, we would have to go slowly. But
imagine a human creates a way to like run our cities or run cars or run certain things. They don't pollute, they don't use oil, they use like say air, and they can also pump back the same amount of air. And maybe they not only do that, but it also benefits nature in some way when you do that. Maybe every time you drive, it pumps out more oxygen into the air. And humans could probably feasibly do that. Since I've thought of it, there's no reason why they couldn't. Because 2,000 years ago, people used to think going to the moon silly. And maybe even 100 years from now, people make that car. And I don't think that comes from trying to take it slow, at least in this sense. So yeah, it's kind of like we destroyed nature like through unnatural, quote unquote unnatural means. So I think we can't just
We
wait
can fix it.
2,000 years
Yeah.
for the trees to regrow or the oil to
Yeah.
come back or water to.
We destroyed it unnaturally, and it doesn't mean that we can't fix it unnaturally as well.
That I agree.
I agree, because we do need all forms of methods when we're thinking and going forward with change. That's why
Yeah.
we all need these. But I'm not sure if "but" is the right conjunction I want to use here, because let's say "and." That "and" people also need to understand that some kinds of change needs deep reflection and deep healing.
Of course. Yeah, you
So
can't
in
force it.
addition
Yeah,
to
yeah,
the
that's right.
unnatural
Yeah,
ways
of
of
course,
like
of course.
Yeah.
coping with these problems,
Of course.
we also need to allow these spaces
Ah.
in which we're trying to reconnect back to the disconnections that we have experienced.
Yeah, maybe the cause of the the
Yeah.
harm. Like
So
if
both.
we're able to fix
Why
the
not?
harm
Yeah.
and we still have the the kind of
That makes
mindset
sense.
of creating the arm,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we
Makes sense,
will
yeah.
Yeah.
definitely lead to. So
Yeah.
I think
The
what she's
mindset
trying
makes
to
sense.
say
Okay,
is
that's
like
smart.
we may have the technical abilities,
Yeah.
but if our mindset is still fixated on harm,
Yeah.
we can fix it, but we'll create a new problem,
Yeah.
and we'll
Yeah.
just keep on falling into a cycle that is so vicious,
Yeah.
and maybe create damage that could just end us. Let's say. So maybe. But what if that's the process?
That
what
might
if
be the
that's the
human
process?
process.
What
Yeah.
if
That is
that's
the process, yes.
And
Yeah.
and what's interesting is we've been here for I don't know 2 million years plus, and I think we're still trying to figure it out in a way
Of
too.
course.
So as bad as it may sound, in the news, maybe there's no other way we could have turned out. We have to go through these kind of changes. Maybe that's how bees figure it out. Maybe they also
Yeah,
kill
there was a
their
time-
mini,
Yeah.
ecosystem,
They're like,
and
"We have to
they-
change if we
yeah,
want
we
to
gotta
survive."
do this, we
Yeah.
gotta do this until they find a sweet
Buzz,
spot,
buzz, buzz.
let's say, and
It's interesting because like evolution, in order for like evolution to work, every change has to be like beneficial, right?
Mhm.
Like you can't just go from like like a ground animal to like a flying animal, and you also can't like have like some weird appendage in between. Every single change has to benefit the creature
Uh-huh.
in order for it to pass on, right? Or it has to be so minor that it can't affect them, right? And we could apply a lot
But
of
the
that too.
idea, but when we say weird to it, I think weird is the wrong way to use it. For example, maybe the first bird was like, other animals looked at it and was like, that's a weird creature. I've never seen anyone with feathers or something. And so it is only considered weird until it works, then it becomes
Mhm.
normal.
And
That's
assuming in the same train of thoughts about humans, before let's say there was a point where birds didn't fly,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
and they had to go through some or changes or mutations or whatever they had to go through until they realized, oh, this is not working, we gotta change. This is not working, we gotta walk faster. This
Yeah.
is still not working, so we
It's
gotta
gotta-
start flying, guys. So those kind of maybe we are in the same situation.
Planes?
We are in the same situation.
Well,
We're like,
I mean,
we gotta
yeah.
industrialize. Okay, there's a problem. We gotta go green. Maybe there will be another problem going green.
There will
We gotta
always be
go.
problems.
So
New
the
problems.
thing is, right, like with all of these changes, even if
Mhm.
they are beneficial, the main thing like preventing a lot of major changes happening is
Mhm.
the people that are in charge are benefiting of the system as it is, right? Like
Okay.
a king
Yeah.
will not willingly give up their crown.
Okay.
They never have, right? The people, even if the king is benefiting massively and the nobles, right?
Mhm.
But the people that they're like ruling over
Yeah.
are suffering. Who gives a damn about the people?
Mhm.
The king doesn't. The people have to decide.
yeah,
And-
if
yeah.
if you look back though, like there's a
They
point
haven't-
in life where you tell someone there's a point where there'll be no king, and they'll be like, what? There's kings everywhere. Of
Yeah,
course,
no,
there's
it's just
never-
how nature-
So,
yeah,
so
yeah,
if we look at
yeah.
it in that
Yeah.
way too,
Yeah.
like there's people in the system, and let's say there's people who benefiting, but there's a point in which we are going to be able to overthrow them. Let's say.
But we have to be careful with bringing the points out unnaturally.
Mm.
Because, like, for example, in Nepal, we had a king until 20 years ago or something.
Mhm.
And then they suddenly removed him. And then it's like, oh, we have democracy and everything's fine.
Mhm.
But that's not how it turns out. Because the king is somewhat like, it's almost filling a hole.
Mhm.
Like, there's like a power, there's a power and everything's kind of stable almost, at least in Nepal. Because the king was like, okay, this road is getting built, the road gets built, or we're doing this, or like, we don't like India, or we like India, we like India, right?
Mhm.
But then now that the king is gone, it's like, some people say it's even worse, where they're like, instead of one person was benefiting, they're like 30 people were benefiting. And
Mhm.
like each of them are fighting against each other, and nothing
But the
gets
thing
done.
is,
And so when
people-
kings are naturally overthrown, that's fine. But sometimes, like even United States,
Yeah.
they try to
Yeah.
unnaturally throw over dictators. It's kind of like you go to another country
Instigating coups, yeah,
and you
yeah,
kind of,
yeah.
let's say you
Yeah.
you kill Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then after that, you don't care what
Yeah.
happens to the people.
Yeah.
You just like
Yeah,
destroy
yeah.
the system, but you don't build up another system. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like, at least there was something going on. At least
Mhm.
Okay.
something
The-
was happening.
the thing is, even if if bad things happen, not even if bad things happen, but let's say, with your example, people thought having a king was better after they had no king, right?
Yeah, not necessarily everyone, but some people, yes.
Okay, let's say some.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true with your case, but hypothetically,
Of
let's
course,
say
yeah.
the majority thought that having a king was better.
Yeah.
Then that feeling came out of experience, not just from theorizing.
Mhm.
So then, if that was better, then they could work towards back that, because now they have experienced what it's like to not have a king.
Mhm.
But it's also not very easy because, I don't know, there's like, imagine you're like, okay, because we'll be going more into geopolitics, but imagine you're a country, right? And you've had a king, and then the king is out. And let's say 60-70% of the people want to have, quote unquote, the king back. But it would still be very difficult because, say, the people in power, then they would have incentive to not give the king back. So it'd be another battle to fight to get the king back. And since they don't have like external support now, that means they can't do anything. But it was because it was the external support which removed the king. So now it's like the people are stuck with, instead of one tyrant, they have 30 people. And when the one person used to say something, it used to happen. But now when 30 people say it, nothing happens.
Mhm.
But how did it get to a point where the king got overthrown?
So what
It
if
was-
it was, let's
was
say in this
forced?
hypothetical, he was forced.
Yeah, we're still talking about hypotheticals
Yeah,
because
he was
I don't know.
he was
your
forced,
example.
and there was also, say, foreign influence. Like, I'm more talking about countries who intervene foreign, like, like with let's say America. America is a good example. So they intervened and then they overthrew a person. But even now that the people, majority of the people want it back, the majority of the people don't have power to overthrow the certain ruling, like even military dictators. So after you overthrow a president, a military dictator comes in, or another general comes in. And now they don't have power to overthrow him.
It's like that. It's sort of like a paradox. Like, if you want to, like, let's say you have a boat, the captain is a sort of dictator,
Yeah.
but the boat still moves to the right location
Yes.
because it's off someone's like decision. You get rid of the captain and you make it democratic. That doesn't mean it's going to be a
could go
better
nowhere,
system,
bro.
right?
No.
No. And so, like, in that situation, it sounds like there was a captain, they were doing something,
Yes.
and now the captain has just been removed, and now
There's like
people are
50
figuring it out.
co-captains.
Exactly. But if it was a process of there was a captain, and then the captain like meets with people and be like, okay, instead of
Yes.
my role of doing everything, I'm going to find people and I'll help guide them how I want to do it,
Yes.
and then I'll step down,
Yes.
and then I'll let you do it. In
Yes.
that way, it's
Not
natural.
suddenly,
It works.
Why do we say bless you? No, no.
Yeah,
now
like,
I'm gonna
why?
learn. Oh my god, I have someone. Thank God.
It's because, like, in the past, I think, I don't know, like, it was the idea that if you sneezed, you were like, your soul was coming out, and like, to stop your soul from like disappearing, the other person had to say like bless you.
But
I
that's your
say
culture.
I
and
say
that's
bless you for a
story.
very simple reason.
Because that's a culture.
No, I don't even know what the culture is, but I know it just means, for me, it's a positive thing. It's kind of like, okay, I see you, I see that you sneezed, and bless you. I could say bless you to anyone more randomly too, because I wouldn't mind saying that. I think it's like a positive thing. So I don't
Then
need to really
because
know the
it's a
reasons
culture.
behind it.
Because people are used to saying that.
It's a culture, but I guess
Yeah, because
like,
in Nepal I used
yeah.
to not say bless you, but that's only because
That's what I
people
mean.
don't expect bless you. But here, when you don't bless people, I feel I would bless people here.
I don't say bless you,
I
actually.
don't. Because I'm not used to it and I don't understand
And
what
it's-
I would be saying that for.
You know, it's like if someone starts coughing, right? You're not weird for saying like, "Hey, you good?" And bless you is sort of like that for
Like,
sneezing.
imagine, like, when I'm in America and I see a person passing by, I try to say hey or hi. Or, like, if I'm in the park. And, like, if I didn't do the same thing in Nepal, it'd be fine. So maybe it is cultural, but it's also something, I'm like, okay, people here expect a hi, or if I didn't say something, it'd be rude. So I don't do it. But I know back home in Nepal, they wouldn't mind because they don't expect it.
The thing is, yes, I agree. I want to do something not just because I'm expected to do it. I want to understand why I would be saying bless you. Like, I don't want to just pray. I want to pray with intention. Let's say, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
like even back home, culture. My culture has everybody praying the Buddhist mantra.
Yeah.
But I was very reluctant to pray because I did not know the meanings. If you want me to pray, you gotta make me not you gotta make me, but give me something that I would be interested and willing to learn. You cannot just expect people to follow something without creating an environment in which you're encouraging them to explore these.
But I think but that could also mean that you have to understand every single thing you do sometimes, and the truest meanings. Like, why do we shake hands? I don't know why we shake hands.
Just
I don't know the
no,
physical
I'm
reason
not
behind
talking when I say knowing, I'm not talking about knowing it in the painful details. I'm not saying, oh, what does bless you mean?
it. No, yeah. So why do we shake hands? Like, we all shake hands. So just tell me the simple reason why we shake hands.
For me, I shake hand because sometimes I don't want to do it, but like because of culture, I'm also used to doing certain gestures, right? That's why I shake hand. But
But you
with
shake
bless
hands
you-
and bless you. It's the same thing, though.
But
both
in
of
my
them are
culture, I
cultural.
did not say bless you, which is why I'm not used to it.
Ah, so only it's because you were.
Probably.
So shaking hands was more cultural even in like Myanmar. So you do it, but bless you don't do it because it was not in Myanmar.
Yes and no. Because let's see.
Because there are so many silly things that we do, and there's really.
So
no-
that's why.
Like, what's a
Tipping
fist
in
bump?
America, right? Like tipping
What's
is
a
not a
fist
thing
bump,
in
bro?
the UK, and I understand the cultural need for
It's
it
nothing,
in the
bro.
US.
That's why the
but I
cultural,
still,
like, the,
but like,
I understand the need for tipping, but
okay, but like, why does something have to be practiced just because you
My
understand?
mom would say no. She does not know the reason for tipping. She would
But-
I mean that's, I mean she's not the.
Does a cultural like practice need to have a justification behind it in order for you to still respect it?
Yes. So I
For
would
me,
say
it's different from.
I say bless you regardless. I don't need to understand it to do it.
For me, it's like, it's either I understand it, then I more like if I understand it and I agree with what I understand, then I'll do it. But sometimes it's just accepting. Like if I feel like I just don't want to accept this, let's say I don't know what it is, bless you for example, then I just don't do it. I don't. It's not because there's a reason or there's no reason or whatever. I just
So it's also a feeling.
yeah. It's just a feeling like I don't think for me.
It
It
doesn't
may
feel.
yeah. It doesn't.
Feel natural maybe.
It's I don't feel the need or I don't feel I don't feel encouraged to do it. Let's say, for example, dressing up. It's one of the things I don't like. You know.
Really?
talked about
Yeah, it's I don't really do it much. Monte Carlo I did, but yesterday I was supposed to dress up for my performance. I didn't, and they were all like, "Why?" I'm like, I just don't think it makes any sense for me, or I just don't agree with it in that sense. So I don't do it. So I think it's not only because I understand or
Okay.
whatever.
that
It's
makes
just
sense.
things piling up. That's it.
Yeah. Not completely the same, but sometimes I do understand as well.
Mhm.
But I don't want. There are also things that I don't do because, well, it's very similar. I don't feel it.
Okay.
Wait, what was the example that I was thinking? Like for me, not with that thing, but I do things because I want to, and it's more of a gut feeling. It's not really tied to what is expected of
Okay,
me
that's good then.
or what other people want.
Mhm.
Like I have this gut feeling, I don't know where it comes from. For example, I do this thing where when I go down to fill water, I always ask other people if they want their water as well.
Mhm.
And I don't do it because it's expected. It's not a culture back home either.
Mhm.
It's just I just want to know if it's not even my brain is not even thinking, "Oh, if I do this, I will get this."
Mhm.
I'm not thinking about other consequences either. Right now, I'm going down, and if they needed water, I could have just got it for them as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what I would say. I'm a very intuition oriented person, and some might say that it's not good,
Mhm.
especially if you're used to like rationalizing or like reasoning.
Mhm.
But for me, I have a lot of trust around my gut feeling.
Mhm.
because I have a healthy relationship with it.
Okay, so then I would say to saying bless you when you sneeze is like a way of just like acknowledging someone. And
Yes, sir.
you know, like if it's just like you were saying, like you want to get like ask them if they want some water when you're going there, you're like acknowledging them as a person that could need water.
Yeah.
You're not doing it because you're like, oh, if I get water for them, then they'll owe me this, and then they'll get water for me next time. You're doing it because you're a social person, and you're acknowledging their needs,
Yeah.
and you know you're going to do it, so you're going to help them out, right?
For the same reason you open
Yeah.
doors or you keep doors
Yeah,
open
yeah,
for
yeah.
you.
Right, right.
Okay, for example,
And
when
like,
I sneeze,
When you
I
sneeze, I can't do anything to stop your sneeze from happening. But I can
Like-
acknowledge
Bro,
that
you
you
can,
have
bro.
sneezed. Oh yeah, yeah.
why don't
Death.
we?
Cause a sneeze is quite violent, right? Like some people have like a achoo, and other people are literally screaming the house down, right? And like sometimes you just want to like if someone just shouts loudly, right? You wouldn't just like acknowledge, just be like, okay then, like and then they're like, okay, cool. You might want to ask like, hey, are you good? And like a sneeze is effectively that. I would say you're normalized to not even recognize a sneeze as something to acknowledge.
Yes.
Why?
So if you were normalized in culture, your gut feeling would tell you this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
Wow,
But like,
interesting
why
topic.
do
Because
I?
imagine,
But no, wait.
like I have a gut feeling when
Can
I see
I
my
acknowledge
grandmother.
in my own way?
Sure.
Can I just say bless you, or can I, for example,
Yeah,
when
they say
someone sneezes?
Gesundheit, bless you.
Wait,
like,
no.
you good
I'm
fam.
not just talking about words. I'm not just talking about words. Once someone sneezes, and when I see that they need something, I'll be like, hey, do you need tissue? Do you need something?
That and
I
I would
so
say
No,
acknowledge
you
it.
can do anything, but
Yeah.
certain people expect certain things. Like I can
Why
acknowledge.
should I just do things because you're expecting it out of me?
Number one, okay, I agree. You don't have to do it.
That's good.
But my grandmother, I can either hug her or I can say namaste, or I can touch her feet. Now, would I normally do that? Probably not. But because if my grandmother expects it, I will do it. Because certain things are about respecting that the other person can have views that are different from you. But I will respect your views to an extent if it doesn't really harm anything of me.
Sure.
So when I like touch my grandmother's feet, I do it like okay, like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't do it. because-
like you can even take this like pronouns, right? Like it's
Yeah,
such a
like-
minor thing. Some people won't respect it, some people will, and like it's like a simple thing that can be difficult for someone who's not experienced it, right?
But wait, with pronouns, I would not compare the situation because if I am not using their pronouns, I am not misgendering them. I am still like I'm
No,
still
'cause
acknowledging
people
things by
say the
some
same
other
thing,
ways.
like oh, I was raised with just two genders, like male, female, and I'm not,
totally.
and I won't do this for you because I don't do this in my culture.
I don't think it's
Yeah.
the same thing for me. I think not saying bless you doesn't really harm anyone or make them feel
Yeah.
inferior or
That,
bad
but
or so
you're
on.
now assuming what other people
yeah,
feel.
from your point of view,
Yeah.
is their culture.
Like some people might get offended, like, hey, you didn't say bless you.
Okay, why do you?
I haven't-
Would you get offended?
I am not gonna assume what other people are gonna get offended by. This
No,
is just
I'm
a
just
minor
asking
thing.
you.
I mean,
I
sure,
don't-
like a little bit. I would get thrown off.
Why-
I'll be like,
why?
why? are you
Yes.
not
Tell me
saying-"
why.
Because that's just what's expected.
Yeah.
Like,
wait,
by,
but
like,
let's
when
explore
something-
this further.
Like,
Let's
there's a
explore this
dichotomy.
This is
further.
good.
Yeah.
This is
We
good.
need to
It's
explore
it's
this
like
further.
why if someone walks in and they're not wearing clothes, right? But like they were raised in a nudist colony, I'm not gonna be like if I freak out or if either of us freak out, right? We're gonna be like
Right? Because
we're having a
why
debate.
is this guy wearing clothes?
Yes,
That's
yeah,
so
yeah,
weird.
yeah.
What's he wearing?
No, but the thing is, me not saying bless you, how does it? No. Tell me how. Why you got?
it's okay.
For
So
the
I'm
same
not saying
reason,
you
for
cannot.
the same reason, when I don't bow to my grandmother, she could get angry.
it's a
But the
social
thing is,
contract.
I would not.
No,
I
like,
would not expect you to know to bow to my parents.
No,
But
but like
obviously
people
not
have
to your
told
parents.
you. People have told you that this is what's happening in the culture repeatedly, and you still choose to not do it.
Okay, then I would agree with that. But
No, I still am just.
No, but I think
I
it's not
just
as
think-
big a
I
deal.
ju-
It's not
I-
as
I
big
ju-
a
I
deal.
ju-
It's not
I
as
just don't
big a
think
deal.
it's the same.
I
I just don't think it's the
No,
same.
but I
Not
think it's
literally the same.
It could be like minor league baseball and major. No, not minor league, but it could be Division 3 baseball.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
No,
it's
no.
just
There's
a
scales
courtesy.
to it. Obviously,
It's
there's
just a
scales to
courtesy.
it.
It's
Yeah.
not necessarily about like
I think
whether
it's a
it's
courtesy.
right or wrong.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think there's ways to show courtesy, and it doesn't need to be one way. It doesn't need to be only.
But no, I agree, bro. Like, if it does not fit with your like idea of courtesy, you shouldn't like force it.
Sure.
But I feel it fits within Brian's and my idea of courtesy.
Yeah, and I think that's beautiful.
And that's fine, actually.
It's perfectly.
How can we agree on everything?
The thing is, I actually don't
I feel like
mind
I just
being
don't
offended.
need to be ashamed for not saying that.
We're
one's saying
not
be
trying
ashamed.
to shame you. We're trying to show you like what it is.
Like,
for
it's
the
from my
example.
perspective.
Yeah,
Like,
because
that's
you're
how I
saying
see
like
it.
it doesn't affect someone that much, and we're saying like okay,
I
but
did
like
not say that.
Lelo.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Gotta take respect.
Like what Senchy saying, like courtesy. It's just like it's like an expected behavior. It's like okay, we don't when we're born, right? We accept a social contract, right?
Yes.
It doesn't have to be explicitly laid out, but the social contract exists, and we all behave by it, right? And if we don't behave by it, it's bizarre. Like someone could walk in here and just start shouting.
Working. No, they
and
could
just-
start
yeah,
working
start
in the
working.
NPC.
Right. And there's
And then we
nothing
stop
wrong
it. Yeah,
about
nothing, yeah.
that in of itself. There's
No,
nothing
but
to be
no,
offended
but
by it. It's just
wouldn't you
common
be
courtesy.
curious why this person is shouting? Like, wouldn't
Sure,
you be
sure.
curious why I'm not saying that?
Or like if someone those are extremes.
I would be
Someone just
curious,
starts
but the
working.
action would not have changed. The person would have still come here and
And they have all the right to do that, right?
Not really. I mean, but I would be concerned. Like, are they okay? Why are they shouting in
so
this
then
place?
probably when a person use what you said, then a person when you don't say bless you would be concerned for you. Is that what you're saying?
No, but what I'm saying is people don't do things for no reason.
That I agree, 100%.
So, for example, if I did not say it, then
There must be a reason for you not saying it.
yeah.
Okay, I
A
agree.
reason as in like there must be situations like.
But the person could, okay, the reason, there's always a reason, I agree. But then when you leave it to a person to interpret it, they could always interpret it in more negative sense.
Yeah.
Because it's
But
like,
I'm not in control of the
I agree,
possibility that
but,
they might
but
be
I know
negative.
but I know
We're not
like
trying-
when I'm in a rush,
Wait,
when I'm in a
let's
rush
do it.
and I don't stay, hold open the door and I run fast. Yeah, I'm not in control of the situation that they'll react negatively and think this guy was just rude. But there are certain,
I accept that will be rude
Yes.
or interpreted as rude.
Yes.
But I have to like accept it.
I have a bit of like you talked about social contract that we sign up. I think within that contract we do have things that we allowed to
100%,
we just
100%.
if you don't want to do it, it's fine.
'Cause
You know,
that's
if you
also
wanna
part
do
of the
it's
social
fine.
contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So I think bless you is among those things.
100%.
In my
even
opinion.
I agree. Bro. Even
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree.
And then we talked about pronouns. I think those are a bit, stronger. It's like, oh, you gotta
Yes.
do this.
Yeah,
It's more on the
Well,
cutter.
some cultures might not even have pronouns, right?
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
cultures might have pronouns.
Yeah,
I'm just
like
saying, in this
we
contract,
don't-
like I would agree. Like
Yeah,
it's a more of a stricter like
Yeah.
you should follow this. Like someone's name.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to call you by your name.
Yeah.
But it's kind of rude.
Yeah, it's very rude. not to,
And it's
yeah.
a bit extreme than
Yeah, of
not
course,
saying
of
bless
course,
you.
of course.
So I'm thinking because bless you is not in that category.
No, I agree.
I don't feel strongly about it. Why should I do it?
No.
So
that I agree.
in that sense, I'm saying like should is also a very strong word.
Yeah.
I think like it's not that big of a deal simply by the way we categorize things, right? But I think what's important is to look at the logic that you're applying to figure out
Yes,
why
why
you're
you're
doing
doing
it.
it or why
Right,
not
right,
doing
right.
it, yeah.
Like to someone else it might seem like a minor thing, but to other people it might be a big deal.
I think it's just a matter of difference in what we are prioritizing. Like for me, like from listening to what you just said, acknowledging someone by using the correct gender pronouns that they want to be addressed by is respectful. To some people, just acknowledging their needs by saying bless you is respectable. But for me, because that's what I mean, it's all at least for me, I'm talking for me. Everything is situational. I learned about like gender issues, how it's all connected to the system. That's why I'm like more aware of how urgent and what kind of weight it carries to acknowledge a person by using their pronouns. But I have not taken religious classes or like I don't know. I don't know why.
This I wouldn't say this is religious. This is like a cultural thing.
Yeah,
Maybe
Okay.
it's
maybe
more
it's religious
social,
con-
actually.
Yeah.
Social.
Okay, I don't know where I would learn about bless you in
Yeah.
that kind of depth.
Sure.
You know, that's why I did
Yeah,
not.
they don't have classes.
Sure.
That's why I did not.
Sneezing one
I
of
don't
us.
know. I feel like we should come up with that. Like a bunch of international
That's so
students
good.
just discussing about what bless you means and like how we acknowledge
But no, we should
things.
we can't just be international. There must be some people.
We need like an American. That's for sure.
I mean,
We
yeah.
need it desperately.
Yeah.
Every fabric.
Okay, so so you agree? You agree?
Okay, so I agree. Now I have
With what?
realized
There's so much
that-
we said.
No,
You
I
can't possibly agree with everything.
that sometimes things could just be done, even if you don't understand it fully. That's
Yes.
the point you made out.
Yes.
I agree with that. And Brian pointed out that sometimes it can be offensive or like it could make people feel a certain way when you don't do the culturally expected things. And I feel like it's okay for both parties. And for me, for example, if my partner has that culture and if my partner feels offended or thrown off when I don't say bless you, then I'm willing to say bless you because I don't want my partner
Right.
to feel that way.
Okay.
It's that simple for me, right?
Okay.
It should be.
Yeah.
It's
So-
about
That's beautiful.
relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing is like it's not to say like just because it's someone's culture means that you have to respect
Yeah.
it. Like the main thing I think we're disagreeing on is like bless you is such a minor thing that is
Why are
very
we even
difficult.
bothering?
Yeah, exactly. It's very difficult to have a stance on it that's like negative outside
Yeah.
of that you have not done it before, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like I don't think that's like a good enough justification
Okay.
personally.
Yeah,
I don't think that's
It makes
productive.
sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it begs the question though that okay, are we supposed to not offend? Are we supposed to not offend?
We
Are we?
like
I
supposed
think
to is a
no.
loaded
I
phrase.
think I think we are supposed to offend, but that offense
does that-
should be related to something that is difficult to talk about. Like there are usually things that are difficult to talk about, and if you are offended by it, it should be something for you to reflect on. Like
I love
why
how
are
Lelo
you
says-
offended?
Yeah.
I don't know, it's like, bro, but this is what I think. I think there's a balance, and I agree with what Brian said. But there's always a balance, as in, I agree. I see where you're coming from. It's like, am I supposed to do something just because a person feels
Yeah.
offended? How can I control their like offense to me? You know, or like, am I supposed to say wrong things or not say what I want to say just because it will offend certain people?
Yeah.
And that I think it's a strong balance. There's a careful balance.
Can we just ask question?
Even
I
that
mean,
is.
for example, like if someone got offended, I could ask from a genuine place, hey, can you explain why you got offended? Then I could understand what they were thinking. I could explain to them what I was thinking instead of just assuming that we were, or leaving at the fact that we offended someone.
Yeah,
We
but
could
that-
try
that-
to understand each other.
That's asking a lot
Beautiful.
from someone as well, right?
But
like
the
not everyone
thing-
is like once they get offended, they're like, okay, well, you know what?
But
Let
I
me
feel like
analyze
that's
why.
why
I-
we are in a lot of problems.
Yeah. So that definitely doesn't like it. It's not likely to happen, or it doesn't happen as
Fine,
more often.
It's not
fine.
practical.
I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, but
Yeah,
I'm saying
yeah.
it doesn't happen. But no,
Fine.
getting to what Lelo was saying, I think it's like a balance of rights,
Mhm.
because no rights occur in vacuum. For example, you have a right to freedom,
Mm-hmm.
but does that mean you can walk into the White House?
No.
So, or like we have a right to live wherever we want, but does
Mhm.
that mean you can build a house in like one of the old Nepali, buildings that are like culturally preserved? That
Mhm.
means no. So,
Do you-
like all kind of rights are in
Mhm.
subject. So that means you have right to say whatever you want.
Yeah.
But does that mean you have a right to say, like cause someone direct tangible harm? It's
Mhm.
like, do you have a right to order someone to hit someone, and that
Mhm.
actually happens?
Mhm.
So that's probably no. So if we balance out those rights, that means you definitely have a right to say, like not say bless you.
Mhm.
And I agree, because those are small things,
Mhm.
but that's because the harms are very less.
Mhm.
There are kind of no harms.
Yeah.
And I think maybe what you prioritize more is how you feel about it than how the person will feel, because there is
Mhm.
less harms.
Mhm.
But I'm sure you would not say something like, "Oh, fire," in like a crowded theater,
Yeah.
when it could cause panic.
Yeah.
Because you realize even though that you have those rights,
Yeah.
your rights don't matter as much as maybe say harm to all these people.
Exactly.
But when you adjust the arms in terms of bless you, it's like not much. So I feel that's how you.
Yeah, that's more or less how I think about it. It's like, because when I look at the things, like I could say something about a math. Let's say I talk about math, a debate about math. I know that could potentially cause harm, but
About meth?
math, math,
Oh.
maths.
Yeah.
We call it maths, but I don't know,
Yeah,
Americans. And then I could probably debate on math more freely than I could debate on, let's say, gender and pronouns, because I know whatever I say may potentially cause harm, but I feel like it's a contained kind of harm. So knowing that kind of makes me decide whether to actually try to, to be in a position where I can offend or not.
Are you talking about like how some things have
Yeah.
consequences
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you say things?
yeah. So in my level of this is very consequential. A billion people die, all of us die, and then there's no consequence. For me, bless you is very low on the
Yeah.
scale, and that gives me the leeway or the
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
the probability. I mean, not probability, but the
freedom to.
freedom to try to do what I think is best,
That's
which
true.
is not necessarily not saying bless you, but showing courtesy in other ways.
Yeah.
But if that's I'm trying
Like
to answer.
someone's
I'm-
scale could be different
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the bless you
Yeah,
hours,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
True. But I still know that even if the person thinks the whole world is gonna die, when
Yeah.
I don't say bless you,
Yeah.
I still believe
Yes,
that
because you have
it's
to
a-
operate on your own
yeah,
scale.
Yeah.
I agree.
I still believe that my own scale is kind of well
100%.
calibrated compared to the person, because knowing I feel like
Yeah, that's why you have your scale.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you feel it's well calibrated.
Yes.
If
But
you
like,
felt it
okay,
wasn't.
yeah,
At one point, do you start reflecting to adjust your scale? Because, for example, what if on your scale,
Mhm.
not saying the right pronouns is like very low, and for other people is like very high because
Mhm.
it's consequential.
Okay.
So like, when do you start thinking?
I
about
feel like
readjusting
data
your
really
scales?
gives us better understanding. I'm not saying statistics are concise or whatever,
But it is important.
but I think data,
Statistics are
yeah,
important,
yeah,
yes.
are important.
No,
And
statistics
knowing
are like-
knowing how many people died because they didn't hear bless you in their lives, versus those people who died because they were misgendered
100%.
or
But
view-
no, but
their
that is-
gender is viewed as
Yeah.
not.
No, but that is
Not a
also
gender.
that's also like a jump between like causes.
Yeah.
It's like saying, if, for example, if I misgender everyone I see here,
Mhm.
does that how many people will die statistically?
No, but yeah, now we are talking about.
It's like we jumped from.
Very-
Like, I agree there are
Maybe
been
here,
violence based
but
on like
in a
gender
bigger
religion.
context,
That's not a
in the
causal
whole world.
relationship.
We're talking about like trends versus like individual acts, right? Like
Yeah.
like you not saying bless you is not going to lead to someone dying.
But maybe the entire society being less considerate of people could
Yeah.
lead to some harm.
Yeah.
Which we don't see as clearly.
Like in general, to me, like the idea of saying bless you is like part of what builds like a considerate society, maybe.
Yeah. Mhm.
Like it's like a small inconvenience for yourself
Mhm.
that like is like even a minor, if not inconsequential, like positive to the other person.
Yeah.
But I still choose to do that
That's good.
because I want to show my consideration.
Yeah. Can I add? Yeah, I like what Senchy said about like being considerate. That's like the main thing, regardless of what we're saying. Like we
Yeah.
should like being considerate to each other is like a very human nature or like a trait that I want to foster, right? But not a but. I don't think I'm arguing on the fact. I'm not against saying bless you. But will you think about why some people say bless you? Do we need to think about it? Like, for example, when you were talking about like rights and the things you do, earlier you were asking about, oh, you might have the rights to walk anywhere you want, but like would you walk into the White House? Like you throw these scenarios, right? And then all I can think about is, why would I be trying to walk into the White House? Like if I was trying to walk into the White House, there must be something that led to that.
Yeah, I want to
Those
see
are still
I want to see the
important.
painting.
Huh?
I want to see.
I want a selfie with Joe Biden.
I want to see Number one, a painting of Abraham Lincoln. Then I want to see the nuclear codes.
Okay, that was it. Let's say that was the reason.
Freedom of
Why
information.
was it not
Yeah.
acceptable? And why did this when everyone else know without having to explicitly say that, hey, you cannot walk into the White House just because you wanted to see the paintings?
Yeah.
Why did this person alone thought that they could do that? There must be a reason.
Yeah.
Why is this person thinking?
So what do we do with the reason though? What does the reason do?
We
Does
can't
it justify
understand-
anything?
We can understand about
So-
how
so
mental illnesses, mental disorders, just are different ways of thinking.
Yeah, but okay, regardless of whether there's a reason behind it, the person will still be stopped, Or like example, there's a person who wants to visit your room, your summer house.
They will still be stopped, yes.
Yes, and they should kind of still be stopped, and then maybe we can find out their justification. But that's almost secondary. Like
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
must still happen. Like
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
one must be allowed to get inside your.
Yeah.
I agree with
Yes.
that.
So it's like, yeah, I agree about the reasonings, and that we can do it later. But first things first.
Yeah.
So wait,
No
May-
people
May,
inside my
you're
house who I don't know.
You're saying, I think you're asking like, okay, just because it's like a cultural like behavior or context or whatever, and it still has like a benefits or whatever, there should also be a justification behind that behavior outside of just the benefits it gives.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't
Can
think
you
there
repeat
is.
that?
So like okay, let's take like okay, I don't want this to be like a gender debate, but like let's take pronouns, right, and assume there was no data that showed the benefit of it, and it was just someone asking you,
Yeah.
even outside of a cultural thing, right? This is just an individual that comes up to you and says like, call me by this.
That's good.
Okay, would you still do that?
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Lelo?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I would do that.
It really like breaks down my argument
So if
in a
people-
way, but also kind of. I don't want to say this on tape.
Then you should definitely say that.
Yeah, but I think
Let's work with it.
the reason I would call them that, other than respect, is also the, like me thinking like this now and knowing the consequences, even to me, not only to them, of misgendering them, kind of puts me in a corner.
Okay.
In that sense.
It's hard to like even
Yeah,
explore
yeah.
this idea because of the context that you even
Yeah,
have.
yeah. So-
Sure.
so in-
let's take
in-
But
something else
still
then.
so okay, were
So,
you
so
coming?
there's two like for me there's
Yeah.
two ways. It's two ways. It's the consequences of the person, like me spreading the word that there's only two genders and other genders are not there, and then there's another consequence by society of me being on tape saying stuff, and then people seeing it and canceling me, There's those two consequences which for me are high up in the list, let's say.
And that's already influencing your
Yeah, yeah.
decision, that no matter what.
But thinking about bless you, for example, there
No
may
one
be
will cancel you for not blessing
there may be that first part, I'm not respecting this person or I'm offending this person, but the repercussions are not as violent, let's say. So the average, let's say, I'm using math because I think mathematics. Let's say the average, it doesn't really total to that, like doesn't go that high compared to pronouns.
100%.
How about something like that's slightly less inconsequential, right? Like,
can I still answer?
oh, sure. I think you said yes. You would still respect them. Why?
I would say yes because okay, like for me, whenever someone throws a situation at me, I don't just think of what I would do. I'm like thinking, if that situation actually happened to me, I would be able to vibe it out. Vibe it out as in like, if I thought it was weird to say it, if I thought there would be some kind of danger, I would be able to feel it. If, for example, if someone was going to tape me and then post it and then I could get canceled, then I believe I would be able to feel it out. Or maybe it's just my belief. I might not actually be able to feel it out. I have like genuine trust in people that I first met. I don't start with like, oh, this person might be trying to kill me.
Yeah.
So that's why I have gotten into a lot of problems as well. I have been scammed.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying what I do is always great, but just because of a few instances in which I have been lied to or scammed doesn't make me go around not being able to believe in people. If someone like came and asked for me for food or like asked to tell them something, then there are many things you could work on. You could look at them. You could look at their gesture. There are many reasons as to why I could just give it to them. Like, why should I be keeping it away?
So, but like, okay. See, the problem with that though is now you're like looking for justifications outside of the request.
Not justification. I will just be able to feel it out. I wouldn't even be thinking.
Like, no, that's so.
That might not be good, but like I might not be thinking.
I think your approach is more practical, right? But like what I'm looking at in this hypothetical is your like how you approach that decision to do something. Outside of like any, like it's inherently meaningless. Like if someone just said like, comes up to you and says like, it comes into your house, right? And says, I don't want to take my shoes off. Because some people don't take their shoes off when they come into your house, right? How do you respond to that? Would you be okay with it?
I would say,
but then like,
I would explain it to them why they should take it out.
So,
Because
okay, then,
let's say
let's
their shoes are dirty.
Let's say not shoes, okay? Maybe they say you have to wear a hat, and it's just a guest hat.
That says GUEST.
Yeah. It's just the
Bold.
guest hat, right? Like, there's no like the justification might be meaningless. It's like, hey, we just want to make sure that we know who the guest is, so we put the guest hat on you, right? This is just their behavior, right? And you can suss it out, right? And it's also perfectly fine to not put the guest hat on as well. They're like, oh, if you don't want to put the guest hat on, you don't have to, right? Do you put the guest hat on because it'll make them happy?
See, with those hypothetical situations, because I cannot think about these hypothetical situations in isolation. Because to me, asking me to put a guest hat on is weird because of the other context that I have. Like, in what situation would I be asked to put a guest hat on?
That's why
That's why I'm
Yeah.
still thinking in contextual.
Sure. No, that's the point, right? It is something bizarre that you probably won't experience, and if you do, you'll know it's bizarre, right?
Yeah,
But-
because
but let's
because
say
it
it
removes the
happened.
object from your familiarity. Because if you're saying, "Oh, I would remove shoes because I would be kind regardless of what people ask," then would you remove your hat if a person said it? So it's like, since we're familiar with certain objects, we kind of, instead of the reasons behind them, we are actually hiding behind the objects. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So when I say, "Oh yeah, of course I would remove my shoes if a person asks me," then you're not doing it because
They
the person
asked,
asked you. That's not the reason. Because for the very same reason, I could ask you to take off your clothes, but you wouldn't do that. So it's like there's always some.
Yeah.
The object's
because
not
of
the reason.
that. Okay, yeah. That's a good one. But I just want to highlight though that I would say bless you if I feel like the person really like, if I don't say it the first time. if I don't say it the first time and then they're like, Lelo, you should say, like, it's so sad, or like whatever,
yeah.
depending on
Yeah.
you know, and they really explain. I feel like a good justification for bless you would really make me say bless you. But there's things I do say, and you said saying please is not necessarily
Please and
necessary,
thank
you
yous.
know.
Yeah.
Please and thank, but I do say it, you know.
Yeah.
So it's not like I've diverted completely from
Of course.
human nature, but I just have this one thing.
True,
which,
bro,
you
and
see,
that's human nature too. That's human
what
nature
I'm
too.
saying. It's like
Okay.
there's so many things that I subscribe into this contract that we all have.
Yeah.
It's just this one thing that I'm. It's just this
Now
one thing.
I'm
That's
curious.
like.
Now I'm
I
curious
feel we
why
should
you're
stop
so
here.
fixated on this one thing.
You know what? It might even just be like the contradictions are what makes us humans. Like we shouldn't be perfect, and like this can be the thing. Like I don't like musicals, but I like films.
Are you saying we will be doing it another day once more, or are we still doing it right now?
We're doing
We're doing one right now.
Okay.
with the
One,
geopolitics.
or we'll see how we're feeling after one.
Geopolitics. My political brain is done.
It may not be geopolitics.
I don't know whatever lyrics.
We'll see where it
My
goes. We'll see where it goes.
baby, my
Yeah, we don't know where it goes.
baby.
Bro, who knows where it was? I didn't know where it was gonna go.
Do you know we're gonna talk
No.
about this? But here we are.
Here we are.
Have you
Part
started-
4. Oh, we don't have a camera, so we don't need a.
Oh.
Oh.
But
no,
it's fun.
it's good to.
It's
That's the fun one.
okay.
Okay.
So we we gotta introduce this well. So the question is, what's like, okay, where is the human race going? Because we think, for example, this is the better concept. Democracy probably is the better concept than monarchy, maybe, and it's a very hard thing to like. It's hard to know. So we have a good example, like Nepal, or a theoretical country.
Oh, I like Nepal. I like Nepal as an example.
A theoretical country which recently stopped from being monarchy, and it's now, quote unquote, democracy.
That's what in 2030.
And okay, what I was trying to ask is that maybe this, because people want the monarchy, or in this hypothetical, a majority wants a monarchical governance, and in my I'm looking at in a span of 100 years, what if it's this need or this struggle is just a small percentage? You know, we're gonna have 10 years of struggling, trying to figure out what this democracy thing is, and after that we will see the results. Because just because things were done in a monarchical society, it doesn't mean it cannot be done. We've seen a lot of thriving, quote unquote thriving, I don't know, democracies. So in my perspective, in that case, let's say, I think maybe this is a transition. It's a moment of transition. We're trying to figure out stuff. Yes, there's still that hole for a monarchy, and people are filling it up for now. But with time, probably it'll get a bit better. You know, it's more like a transition. It's like when I'm thinking when birds started to fly, they probably hit a lot of trees. They probably fell, in their nest, or discovered that their nest needs to be in the tree, because animals are gonna consume all the babies. So that's how I'm looking at it. I'm like, it's probably not necessarily good to go back to a monarchical thing, but let's learn how to work around these things that we are still learning how to do. So that was the idea that I had, like, from the onset. It's like, oh, we are evolving, but we don't know how to fly, we don't know how to navigate yet, we don't know how to place our nest, we don't know how to build our nest, let's say. And then with time we're gonna be able to I know things differently. I don't know.
I was reading these books from Nassim Taleb, this guy, and he differentiates between two things, kind of like complex systems and maybe simple systems. Or maybe I'm saying it wrong, but there are basically two systems. One of the systems is like this chair, where use of it doesn't really change it or doesn't make it better. Or like the more I use this chair, the chair will eventually get older, it will wear and tear, get worse. But he says there are certain categories of things. The more I use it, or the more time goes past, the better it gets. So certain of these things, yes. So certain things like that, or even like say the human body. The more you use it, I mean, technically we will die at a certain age, but yeah, even the mind, or like say gym. The more I go to the gym and the more weights I push, I get stronger. My body doesn't wear out. So he says a human society is kind of also like that, where it kind of, things start getting better the more you use it. It doesn't, it doesn't have an end lifespan. So it doesn't mean in 10,000 years society will completely die, since it's like an organic thing. It keeps on growing, or like at least changing.
Yeah.
And so what he says is, the best thing to do with these systems is let them experience like pain, or like let them experience like natural suffering. Because like it's when you stop it that it becomes kind of bad. It's like when you don't move your hands, that they become small and wrinkly. It's like when you don't walk, your legs become weak.
True.
So the same thing with like societies and governments. It's like when you try to forcefully not do something, or forcefully do something, that's when it becomes weak. Or at least that's the idea. So eventually, just let time figure things out, I feel. Because time will figure out what's strong. Because if, like, for example, writing has been in place for 4,000 years.
Yeah.
And I think it could still be in place 10,000 years from now. And so time has decided that this is kind of good. But let's say TikTok, I don't know how long that'll last, but I hope time takes care of it.
I think you got to be careful with those because certain like systems might exist that are dead ends essentially, right?
For example?
Like you can have some cultures that will, or like some like even let's take evolution, right? There's some evolutionary paths that will never improve again. Like sharks have been around for 400 million years.
Yeah.
Same thing with crocodiles, right? Not because in of themselves there's any issue. In fact, they're actually too good for their
Exactly.
environment, right? You need that like added instability that you get with freedom, right?
Yes, exactly.
Almost like interventions, right? And that chaos allows it to like better like improve on of itself, right? So if we take like societies like monarchies, right? Monarchies and empires lasted for a very long time, but something eventually happens that causes it to fail,
Yes.
right? And it's never one thing, right? It's always like simple issues. Or really, it's always money and like wealth disparity. I'm pretty sure that's how Rome fell.
Yeah.
That's how most countries and empires fall.
Or partly of the reason.
Sure. But the main issues with most of these things that cause it to fail is like the societies are built on extractive systems. So the systems that the societies are operating under aren't inclusive and they are extractive. Okay. Inclusive just means that like anyone should be able to come into power or be able to like organize, right? There shouldn't be some form of gatekeeping that prevents people from entering in outside of maybe their ability, right? Like you want a meritocracy, right? You want people in the positions of power based on their utility, their ability to contribute to that. And like the easiest way to do that is just like vote people in. Like you can vote someone who is the best performing like leader.
That's not necessarily true. Just because you're voting, you won't elect the best people.
I agree. There's no like easy way to like measure it. You can definitely confuse people, right?
Yes.
But like it's better to do that than have like a system in which one person is choosing. Because at least in a system where there's 10 people choosing, those 10 people have a better chance of like choosing the correct person than one person.
There's this.
It's
I
just
don't- I
a
don't
better
think that's
chance.
necessarily
It's
true.
not the best chance.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, 'cause
less bad.
it's
I
less
don't
bad.
Even I don't
know.
even know if it's less bad. Like,
Excellent.
I just go back to like realities. Like I know in Iraq or I don't know where, Iran or those places where there was so much instability, and after there's like one, like for example in North Korea right now, what do you think will happen if Kim Jong-un magically dies? Do you think
Then
it
it
will be
would-
better for the North Koreans?
It would ties back to what we were saying earlier about the transitioning point.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily people might be doing worse,
Yeah.
not necessarily because the dictator died,
Yeah.
but because they simply don't know how to transition
Yeah,
to
yes.
the next point yet.
So in a very
So-
large time span.
Yeah. So that is not a causal relationship. They're not doing worse because Kim Jong Un died.
Yeah.
It's because the systems that were already in practice
Yeah.
It has been there for too
has
long.
does exist and can work, but they're not actually productive. But if you remove that system as a whole, there will be chaos, right?
I agree,
Yeah.
but you can't look only in terms of like how in the long scale will it be good or not. It's kind of like saying there's a person who's starving right now, or like in Syria or something, and then George Bush is going to be like, okay, we did it for the the Syrians 20 generations from now will live good lives, but then the mother like whose child is starving will be like, I don't care. So it's kind of like
I'll give an example of like colonies, right? Like let's take like Spain and South America. Spain shows up, Portugal shows up in South America, and their goal from the get-go is extract all of the resources, like in Africa as well, like extract all of the resources from this area and move it somewhere else.
yeah.
Now, those colonies eventually stopped being colonies, right? The people who colonized them left as well. But the indigenous people didn't have time to figure out how to organize themselves. Instead, they basically resumed the roles of the colonizers, but themselves. So then you get the dictators, the warlords that continue to practice the same extractive
Yeah.
stuff. So instead of just taking gold or like oil, whatever, rare earth metals, and giving it back to the colony company, the empire, they just sell it to the next highest
Yeah.
bidder, right? Like the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, has been screwed over time and time again, not because of anything wrong with the people's decision. It's just that the systems that the people know to organize themselves have never changed. Even if the people in charge has changed, they're going to just repeat the same cycles.
That reminds me of what Lelo pointed out earlier about we were talking. Yes, systems might change, but if people are not changing in the way we're thinking, if we're not doing those deep reflections, then it doesn't matter because we will still end up in the same similar situations.
Yeah, and that cannot happen when like external surprise influences kind of come. You get what I mean? If people are going to come to their own realization that they don't want a dictator or a monarchy, it has to kind of be within that country. So when external countries start doing something, when external something happens surprisingly, those things never work.
I agree. So like places like India has somehow has been fine. Like they were colonized by the UK, but like a lot of it, like India was able to manage their own systems, and so they have like learned a lot of the colonizing behavior, but they've also learned to like operate in of themselves. America was also a former colony, but they learned to operate in themselves.
Realize they're a colony.
Like for Myanmar, it was also it was also colonized by British. And then the military is like the aftermath of the colonizing period, and we are still experiencing it. I cannot say that Myanmar has like healed completely from it.
Of course.
I cannot say that we have come up with our own systems to sustain ourselves. We're still experiencing all of these things, and now we're under the coup. And
okay, I want to address the issue of, does collective wisdom produce better results or not? Like, because if democracy is good, then we should expect better results than not democracy, let's say.
But the thing is, you can't.
Better is very subjective.
And I would say democracy cannot be achieved in one day. Like the same thing we all have been talking about. We cannot just like, let's say people had monarchy for I don't know how many periods, how many centuries, right? And then all of a sudden we're like, hey, now let's go to democracy because theoretically it's better and everyone has a better chance. But
the peasant who's never learned to read,
then
has
how are
farmed their
they-
entire life,
How
is
are we
now
go-
meant to decide.
How are we all gonna make a better decision collectively? Because we cannot expect that. So collective wisdom is not something we can achieve right away. It is another process and process that needs time, effort, and patience and guidance.
That's why
Even for there to be guidance, there should be like a more limited amount of like wisdom. You get what I mean? If there's a whole country that's kind of poor, for them to be taken out of poverty, there needs to be certain people, like certain fewer people.
Sure. Like the 10% that is educated and then is able to lead the 90 like to freedom. Like so you can't expect like everyone to be like a master's level PhD.
But then the moment you open up democracy, that means instead of the 10%, it'll be the 90% deciding, and there could be 2% within the 10% who are say well educated that could make false promises, say we will do this, we will do that.
So then the goal is then, as the 10%, making sure that the 90 as a flat rate has everything that is like the hallmarks of a healthy democracy, right? You want everyone to be fully educated and literate. You want everyone to be aware of the political system, and so that they are informed voters. Like a lot of times, like you're saying, like they can just say, if a politician just says lies, but like no one calls them out on it, and then they're still allowed to practice and they get voted on. It's not a fault of democracy. It's a fault of the system that is trying to do democracy. Like democracy isn't the problem. The problem is that it's a flawed democracy.
Okay, that's good. I like it.
I agree.
Then let's look at the person who like is not learned. They are I don't know, working in a farm, they whatever bad, I don't know, traits we can give them. Are they?
No one said it was bad
I think farming is a bad
Okay,
trait,
whatever,
for sure.
whatever not bad or like less
Sure, sure,
educated
sure, sure.
traits
Illiterate,
we can give them.
illiterate,
Illiterate,
yeah.
let's say. Imagine,
You said
according to any, according to the 10%, one of us is not supposed to vote. How would you feel? Like,
Why are we not supposed to?
yeah, because you're among the people who are not informed.
Then we people who are literate could find an ethical, like,
What's the
people
ethical
can
way?
work collectively to come up with ways to inform people who cannot
Imagine they
be
tell you, oh,
informed in the conventional ways,
Yeah.
or like the ways in which the society is already working.
But then one party informs them saying communism is good, another party informs them saying capitalism is good, another says socialism is good, another says nationalism is good. Everyone educates them in their own way
People
somehow.
will vote what is
Politics
most.
is all about compromise, though, right? I think it's perfectly healthy in a democracy for people to have very different
Yeah.
ways of like managing things. And I
Yeah.
think that makes sense. I think every scenario in a country, like your own small village, will have like a better way to manage itself.
Yeah.
Then like I don't think it makes sense that there should be a unifying like government that decides everything for everyone. I think it should be smaller, but like many more instances, and everyone works collaboratively.
No, I was actually reading about Switzerland and why Switzerland is so successful, but it's like why it's such a good, like it's considered top, and then it's realized it's not because the government is bigger, but because the government is actually smaller. But what does that mean? It means like there's a concept of skin in the game. I was reading a book, Skin in the Game. That means like whatever matters to you, you kind of give it priority. Like I don't care about maybe some random person's visa to Italy, but maybe I care really about my visa to Italy because I'm going to Italy, so it matters to me. And now that obviously makes sense. But what we have done is we have given power, or the government works in a certain way that things that completely don't affect me at all are in my hands. For example, I get to decide what happens to Iraq and Iran. But nothing happens to me if everyone in Iraq passes away,
Oh,
or
that's
nothing
interesting.
happens to me if something bad
good.
happens, right?
Yeah.
So how can we solve this? At least in terms of government. So if everyone governed their own place of like where they were, or own smaller place, or own smaller village, then you would have like there'd be no way for you to be like, it'd be very, very, corruption would be less, or there'd be less infighting, or there'd be like the government system would be better. So in Switzerland, like small cantons or like small like village and township,
Yeah.
they decide what happens right
Wow.
there.
That's the thing.
So-
People are more likely to do and more likely to do bad things, or are more capable of doing bad things when you are disconnected from the
100%.
community
Yeah.
that you might be affecting.
Wow.
That's why people corporates work in offices. Like they don't get to see which land they are going to use, which resources they're going to use, which community in which they will be building their, I don't know, industrial
Wow.
like company.
That's beautiful.
And then they just work, do their paper, because on theory there's no harm. It's okay, they can move out, but
So there are certain things that do benefit from like a national level, right? Like healthcare, medicine. There should be a strict standard that everyone should follow, but those are based on science. They're not based on like
What do
the
you mean
opinion.
based on science?
So, like-
all
like-
sciences I feel based on
Pharmaceuticals, right? Like I'm not gonna go to a random city and then grab whatever medicine they need from my, like if you have diabetes, you want like a specific insulin that is like approved by a good board that is respectable, right?
Yeah.
That is it, right?
but who
Like,
decides which board is
the government.
respectable?
That is the responsibility of the government, right? The government should also decide like the minimum levels of education. You don't want to let that be like, because otherwise you might get like villages that they're like, okay, you know what, we won't teach it. You guys work on a farm, that's it. And
That's
you
nice.
like certain things like that. Like the government should be there to enforce a minimum standard for everyone, and for everything else, it should be up to them to govern.
But the thing is, I agree with that.
Like infrastructure as well, like housing, hospitals. And stuff, yeah.
Yes, I agree with that. But let's say the government requires this type of education, like a standard rate of education in one language, let's say.
Sure.
Then people have different languages. In villages, maybe you might not need to learn to that extent, or like Because they need to farm, because that's their way of
So
living.
if the government requires that, then it's up to the government to provide the requirements needed for that to happen. If
No,
it's a
bro, but
village,
it's
then
like
they,
that's very.
No, but like
it's-
still,
well,
I,
the government
know.
does that with like the post, like the UPS. There are like places in the US that require a helicopter to like actually move the packages instead.
I know.
But that's
So,
still fine because that's
but
the government.
like in practice, maybe in America that's good, but I know in countries like Nepal.
In
like,
Myanmar,
it's
we
weird.
have that.
Like,
We
very
have
difficult.
this requirement that
Yes.
in order for you to pass an education, you have to learn Burmese. But
Yeah.
we have more than 135 ethnic groups, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they and the examination, right? The matriculation examination, it decides everything. Which university you go to,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
work you will get. So if you don't learn the Burmese, like the I
and it-
don't think it's a national language,
Yeah,
but
yeah. No, no,
right now at this
I,
rate, it
I don't know
is.
how you would. So it's different between each nation. Like India has like Hindi and English, right? But basically, every state, there's 27 states,
Yeah.
right? And they each have like, I don't even know how many languages there are. It's like 27 official languages and like hundreds of like
Bless you.
unofficial languages, right?
Yeah.
Those exist, right? But like, if you are a citizen of India, it is expected of you. You need to learn these, right? I'm not saying if that's right or moral. This is not. We're not talking about ethics here. This is just like a part of like a functioning society. You need a common language, a common tongue.
Not necessarily.
That's why we have a lingua franca, like English, right?
Yeah.
In order for us to like share documents with each other.
I don't actually. I don't. Yes, that
Like-
is
like-
their way of living right now, but I don't agree with it because
we are living
why do
in
I
a-
need to learn English in order to?
It is because we are living like this is the consequences of the society that we have ended up in. We are in a global economy and a globalized system. We
And that's
could
also
revert back to like a localized system, but doing that would also mean like a lot of harm.
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
like,
I
I'm talking about-
understand, but I
Because
understand.
for example, like the 125, like let's say the ethnic languages in Burma, those languages also killed off other languages to be the only 125 because maybe 2,000 years ago there were way more languages, but the languages have been slowly dying and coalescing into fewer languages.
Etymology, yeah.
Sure, but
So like, why are we
are
speaking
you
these
saying they
languages?
have killed other languages, so it's okay for this to happen?
I'm not saying it's okay for it to happen, but
Okay,
I'm saying
yeah,
it kind of happens. Like
Okay,
I
it
know I don't
happens.
speak my ethnic mother tongue. Like my grandmother speaks a different language, and my parents speak a different language, but I only speak Nepali. I don't speak their ethnic language.
Yeah.
It's
Same-
okay.
same
Now, I would
It's
like to
o-
speak that.
my
It's
ethnic tongue
okay.
either.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, sure. It's okay that we speak English on a globalized level so that we can communicate with each other. But for me, even Burmese is like suffering from this language thing because a lot of the documentation are still not even digitalized.
Of
It's
course.
still in paper form.
Yeah.
And it's still in Burmese. Like if Burmese is suffering in that manner, consider how other
Oh.
like marginalized languages cannot be documented or recognized or acknowledged.
Some languages don't even have script.
Yes, but like
Okay,
things
wait,
are
wait.
not being acknowledged.
I'm not
yes,
saying-
you,
yeah. Like-
your-
like-
this system needs to do better so that
Yeah,
it can
exactly,
acknowledge other
exactly,
languages
exactly,
as well.
exactly. But you should also not like think to like remove the system as it is. You should think to like change the system to improve it. To
Yes,
benefit
yes,
the
sure.
minorities.
I'm
Yeah,
not
exactly,
talking
exactly.
about like
I agree.
complete abolition. I might want to
Mm-hmm.
go for abolitionist theories, but for me at least, it's not practical to
Mm-hmm.
just like take a system that is in place, just right away strip it away. Because if we don't learn to transition, like we were talking about earlier, then we're gonna end up in that anyway. So I'm not talking about that.
'Cause it was
but this
French, and now it's
system
English, yeah,
needs
yeah,
to
yeah.
do
Yeah, yeah.
better to recognize different languages.
Great.
It cannot just have one language that is like on top.
No,
And
no, no, yeah,
because
yeah,
at this
100%.
rate, people are gonna want to and feel the need and the pressure to learn English in order to be successful,
Of course.
and then leading to not being able to dedicate time to learn our own languages and
So then
feel connected to our
the
own
problem
languages.
then I think the critique then is you need to give like okay, the
Are
the
you willing
need-
to take responsibility for a person who learns their ethnic language but is not able to get a job.
Yes,
Or
you
make
need
money.
to give people more than the justification to do. Like
Like
people
I
need a
believe in like
justification.
morally,
Yeah,
I also ethically I agree that if I
Yeah.
could, I would just only speak Nepali. I would earn in Nepal. I would live in Nepal. I would spend my whole life in Nepal. But the realities are a bit different. So I agree that I should be speaking my mother tongue that my grandmother spoke. But that's not even Nepali, and no one will understand if I speak it in the capital city. And so I can't even live there with that language.
So basically, like you need to give people like an economic reason as well, because people will fundamentally make decisions on their lives
That's the
based
thing.
on an
People,
economic reason.
Politicians,
Like-
not
like-
politicians,
like-
but people have recognized that. Like, we need to give people economic reasons, so we are given economic reasons not to learn our own languages.
Yes,
No,
so you can use it then to give people an economic reason to do that, right?
So the only
Like,
way you can do it is like, I don't know, make
Encourage
countries or
local.
people,
Yeah.
make it stronger by themselves.
Yes.
Because people learn German in Germany, and or I realize that
Yeah.
certain developing countries have like, Japanese
Mm-mm.
people, they speak horrible English, or like at least what I've seen,
Yeah,
they don't
yeah.
speak the best English.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's because they don't need to speak good English.
Yeah.
There's no incentive for
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
They
yeah.
can spend their
the
whole
Swiss,
life.
the Swiss can
speaking-
speak Swiss,
Yeah.
French, German.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like,
They'll learn multiple languages as well.
but then
if all
why
the
is
languages
there
are useful.
higher like
Mhm.
English speaking like prevalency in like Asia, especially South Asia? Like I know in India, Nepal, they speak like good English. Even like a random old lady who makes like who burns
Mhm.
corn for a living
Mhm.
will speak English. That's because there's somewhat of an incentive to learn it,
Mhm.
and she makes a bit more money learning it. So
Doesn't it also relate to religion? Because
Sure.
like
it all comes down to like
no.
bread, to food.
There's
or to
a
survival.
religion. No, religion comes like it's always economic, and religion is a justification for the economics. Economy.
Yes.
No,
Like
but
the
what I'm
religions
saying is
exist
sometimes
because they encourage the economies.
people are not just learning English, but like they, for example, religion, Christian, people who follow Christianity, they have to go to church. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not Christian.
Christianity, like way back, like it was all in Latin. Even like when you're in Latin speaking, and like no one was speaking in Latin. Like my dad, like when he grew up, it was literally in Latin,
Mhm.
and he's in literally India, and like it makes no sense. It's not even English, right? Because that's how like the Bible was meant to be spoken. Like the point wasn't. But like I think what like Senchy and I are saying is basically like, or at least I would say the globalized economy has forced people to like move and like contort themselves based on like the economic opportunities, right? Because people straight up don't want to starve to death, and they don't want their family to starve to death, and they also not just not starving to death, they want a better life for themselves and their family, and people are willing to like essentially mutilate their culture in order to give themselves that opportunity in the idea that their generations will be better off than where they came from. So
Sure,
you
you-
want that like opportunity to be internal. Like in India, there is like the level of competition is insane, and the level of opportunities is minuscule. The unemployment rate in
Half
like
a billion
China,
boys.
500 million people, all educated, they all leave. There's just not enough opportunities, and there's plenty of opportunities outside of it. Now you might say that's like how the system was designed in the first place, and there might be a lot to that as well. You turn the third world countries into these like
Yeah,
production
factories.
factory places where like educated labor is not encouraged, because like companies will not invest in these places for educated labor. They see it as like a very cheap area of labor for exploitation. So like why would they invest in like hospitals or like pharmaceutical companies? I mean, some places do, but like they would get factories, textiles and stuff, right? You want the cities and the countries themselves to not rely on these kind of labors. You want them to encourage internal economies, right? You
Yeah.
want to develop every country to a certain level, so
So
that
they
they
can
don't
speak
need-
their own language.
Exactly. Like the reason why people are learning English is not because they want to, it's because they're forced to. And so you need to give them a situation that allows them to choose. Because I think, like Sanjay was saying, everyone would choose to speak the language that they have history with, right? Like, even take it like in Northern Ireland, right? With the Irish and the English. Like the IRA, there was like terrorist attacks between them because the English were trying to like root out Irish culture. Like Irish have their own language. I think they speak Gaelic.
Yeah. Mhm.
But like most of them, like even in Wales, they speak Welsh. But like hardly any one of them. I mean, some of them do, but they don't really speak Welsh anywhere. So like, it's it's not just like there is like a cultural behavior, there is like an ethnic behavior, but I think if you want to make real change, economic change is where you make the real change, right? Like you give people
Economics
an
is a
economic
very good
reason
one.
and they'll do it. Like people learn computer science not because they love computer science, maybe at the start of it, but because there's a damn lot of money in it, people still like even if they're not interested, they'll like go ahead and learn it. And people like teaching, but the situation in teaching right now pays so little for what the service is, that less and less people are going to be doing teaching, not because they don't want to. Like some people might just want to like have a family and like have a simple life and not do shit, maybe have a farm, but that's not economically viable, so they don't do it, right? You want like a scenario where people can choose to live the life that they want to live, right? And that should be like the goal of any like person, to encourage that. You want to give people not just, I think the difference is like how we define freedoms. Like there's positive freedoms and I think negative freedoms, where one is like um, you have the right to like free speech, right? Like you can do whatever, you can say what you want. You have the right to your own bodily autonomy. That's like um, negative freedoms, right? As in, I cannot do this to you, and so you are free to do that. But positive freedoms would be like, I will give you the education that you need to choose the life that you want. I will give you the money to give you the freedom to have more options, right? I'm not necessarily stopping myself from doing something to you. I'm actually doing something to you that encourages it. Like, I will stop you from doing drugs so that you have more, you're not addicted to drugs. That is removing your freedom to do drugs, but it actually improves your life as a whole because you have so much more to it. It's like another realm of like freedom.